Your desk has been quietly upgraded, and the fixes are weirder than the problems. A stamp kit that seals letters with molten wax, a marker whose ink dries into an actual mirror. We hunted down the 35 strangest gadgets ever made for a desk, and it gets stranger the closer we get to number 1. Stick a normal note over a word, and that word disappears until you peel it back. These drop paper altogether. Each one is a sheet of clear film, so you press it straight over a printed line and read every word through it. Annotate a page without losing a sentence, layer notes on top of each other, and mark a book while the text stays fully visible. Simple, clever, and genuinely a joy to use once you start. Folding a page corner permanently breaks the paper's fibers. The crease never fully heals. These slim cat-shaped markers solve that by using 2 magnets to sandwich the page between them. Slide one over the edge, fold, and it clamps tight enough to survive a bag but light enough to leave the page unmarked. 6 designs, each barely thicker than the paper it's holding. Small enough to disappear into a pocket, good enough that you'll go looking for it. Reading one-handed on a train is a small daily battle. Paperbacks fight you, hardbacks fight harder. This is a molded resin ring that slips over your thumb with a wide curved paddle attached. Slide the paddle between the pages and your thumb suddenly spreads the book flat without cramping. It weighs almost nothing and costs less than a coffee. Strange to look at, obvious the second it's in your hand. Victorian field painters had a problem capturing a landscape before the light moved. This little enameled tin was the answer, and the design has barely changed since. 12 half pans of watercolor sit inside, and the lid folds outward into wings that become the mixing palette. Everything closes into something that slips into a jacket. Nearly 200 years of innovation, and nothing has improved on a hinged metal box. Open your bag, find loose pages fanned across the bottom. Every ring binder does this eventually. This one has an actual lock. Push a slider left, press a button on top, and only then do all 26 rings release. The cover then folds a full 360 degrees, so an open binder takes up half a desk instead of a whole one. 26 rings that stay shut until you personally permit them. A cast metal body, a hand crank, and a lifetime warranty on a pencil sharpener. Inside sits a helical cutting head that shears the wood rather than scraping it. Feed a pencil in, and it stops automatically the instant the point is finished, so it physically cannot over-sharpen and eat your pencil. Schools have used the same design for decades because nobody has managed to break one. Crayons haven't meaningfully evolved since childhood, which makes these genuinely surprising. Without a wrapper to peel or a sharpener to hunt down, the color twists up from the barrel like lipstick. They lay down thick, glossy pigment that blends under your finger. Then comes the trick. On the water-soluble versions, a wet brush turns those marks straight into watercolor. One tool, 2 separate results, decided by whether you reach for a brush. That mechanical crunch is the best part. Then a strip of paper drops away in perfect scalloped lace. A single squeeze turns a plain edge into something that looks machine embossed. Line it up, punch, slide along, punch again, and the pattern continues seamlessly down the page. There's something addictive about watching a plain edge turn ornamental in under a second. Tired of photos that buckle and dry wavy the moment the glue hits them? QAQcews' answer was to abandon liquid altogether and dispense adhesive as a strip of tiny dots instead, rolled on like correction tape. The dots grab instantly but stay repositionable for a moment, so a crooked photo can be lifted and straightened. 16 meters in a roller that fits your palm, and not a single wrinkled page. Count the tools in this one barrel and you get to 5 before you run out. 4 gel ink colors, black, red, blue, green, plus a working 0.5mm mechanical pencil, each deployed by its own slider. Everything inside stays in its own lane, and the pencil pulls its weight rather than just filling a slot. A whole pen cup's worth of color, folded into something that clips to a shirt. Ink that dries into an actual mirror sounds like a claim that won't survive contact with reality. It survives. The pigment settles into a surface so smooth and reflective that fresh lines throw back light like polished metal, and on glossy paper, you can see your reflection in the stroke. Model builders use it to fake chrome plating. Watching a dull black marker leave behind something that looks like liquid metal never stops being strange. Hand this to someone and they'll click the end, expecting ink. What comes out instead is a pair of blades. The whole thing is housed inside a slim, pen-shaped body that slots into a pencil case without the safety concern of loose scissors rattling around. Twist and the cutting edges emerge, twist back, and they disappear. The kind of design trick that makes people ask to hold it twice. Tape dispensers carry an unquestioned design flaw. They're larger than the tape they hold. QAQcew's fix was to shrink the dispenser until it clips directly onto the roll itself. A small stainless blade sits inside the clip, and pulling the tape across it produces a straight, clean cut instead of a ragged tear. 10 grams of steel and plastic that make every roll you own smarter. There's a dial on the side, numbered 1 through 5, and turning it changes the geometry of the blade inside. Setting 1 gives a stubby, blunt point that survives heavy pressure. Setting 5 produces a long needle tip for fine detail work. The same pencil, the same sharpener, 5 separate results depending on what you're about to draw. Turning a dial to change how a pencil behaves is a tiny idea with a surprisingly large payoff. Erasers age badly. They round off, collect graphite, and lose the sharp corner that made them precise. Sealing one inside a pen body fixes all 3 at once. The eraser stays clean in the barrel, and clicking the top advances a fresh section forward as it wears. The grip lets you work at a proper angle for detail. Rubbing out stops being a smudge and starts being a decision. Paint that refuses to sink is the whole trick here. A natural seaweed thickener turns plain water into a gel, dense enough to hold pigment on the surface, where it spreads into floating discs of color. Drag a needle through them and the colors swirl into patterns that could never be painted by hand. Lay paper on top and the entire design transfers instantly. Every sheet is one of a kind because the swirl you just made can never physically be made again. Somebody loaded 2 different shades into a single highlighter nib, which sounds like it should end badly. The chisel tip carries a pale color through the center and a deeper version of it along one edge, so every mark arrives with its own darker border already drawn. Students use it to show importance and emphasis at the same time, where most people reach for a second pen. A small feat of engineering, hiding inside something that looks entirely ordinary. Restless hands in a long meeting usually end in someone quicking a pen until the room glares. The barrel is built from magnetic segments that separate into rings, rods, and spheres, all snapping back together through magnetism alone. Build a shape, pull it apart, rebuild it as something else, then reassemble the whole thing into a pen that genuinely writes. Most fidget toys do one thing badly. This does 2 things properly, and the transformation between them is the whole appeal. Tell me in the comments if your hands are already reaching for something. Press hard enough and the mechanical pencil lead snaps. That's simply physics. Zebra's engineers decided to argue anyway. 2 springs sit inside the mechanism. One absorbs downward force by retracting the lead, the other handles sideways pressure by extending a metal sleeve around it. Between them, the lead is protected from almost every angle you can attack it from. You can stab the paper and keep writing, which is a deeply satisfying thing to test. Shaped like a stick of lip balm and roughly the same size, this is one of the better disguises in stationery. Slide the body, and stainless blades emerge from the tube. Slide it back, and they retract completely, which means the cap disappears from the design and nothing sharp rides loose in a bag. The blades carry a coating that adhesive tape won't stick to. Small, silent, and unrecognizable until the moment it starts cutting. Label makers usually die when the ribbon runs out, and the refill costs more than the machine. This one skips ribbons altogether. The app holds hundreds of templates, barcodes, QR codes, cable tags, jar labels, and you pick one, type into it, and the finished sticker rolls out already cut to length at a resolution sharp enough for professional use. Small enough to hold in one hand, and the reason every drawer in the house suddenly looks unlabeled. Pixel art on paper normally means graph paper, a ruler, and enormous patience. This marker removes all three by ending in a perfectly square tip. Every press leaves one crisp pixel, and pressing repeatedly builds images the same way a low-resolution screen does, one block at a time. A second fine tip on the opposite end handles outlines and text. Watching a recognizable character emerge from nothing but stamped squares is quietly hypnotic, and it turns ordinary paper into something that looks pulled from an 8-bit game. The tip really does resemble a beetle's horn, and that shape is doing real work. The angled faces let one pen produce two separate marks, a broad band when laid flat, a precise, thin line when tilted onto the edge. Textbook users worked out fast that this halves what needs to live in the pencil case. Function borrowed directly from an insect, which is a sentence Stationery rarely earns. Ever noticed how a pencil point dies about 4 strokes into shading? 17 millimeters of exposed graphite, roughly triple a normal point, comes out of this machine. Artists want that length because a long taper covers ground fast and shades smoothly without constant resharpening. A selector switches between sharp and blunt, and an auto stop cuts the motor the moment the point is finished. You'll find yourself sharpening pencils you had no plans to use. Down to the final 10, and this is where it stops being stationery and starts being magic tricks. Before envelopes had glue, they had wax and a brass stamp, and the process is pure theater. Melt a few beads in the small spoon over a tea light, pour the pool onto paper, then press the engraved seal down and hold. Lift after 10 seconds, and the impression is razor sharp, permanently raised, and impossible to open without destroying it. A centuries-old security measure that survives purely because opening one feels extraordinary. Halfway down a page, your handwriting has already thickened, and you've never once noticed it happening. Uni's fix was a set of interlocking gears, and every time you lift the tip from the page and set it down again, the mechanism turns the lead a fraction. Over a sentence, that rotation wears the graphite into a permanent cone instead of the flat wedge that every other pencil develops. Your line width simply never changes. A tiny machine correcting something your hand had been doing wrong for years. Correction tape covers mistakes in a blank white stripe. Plus asks the obvious follow-up question, why does it have to be blank? These dispensers work identically. Roll along the page, apply pressure, but instead of white, they lay down lace borders, scattered polka dots, tiny leaves, and floral trim. Correcting an error and decorating the margin become the same motion. Turning the dullest object on the desk into the prettiest is a genuinely funny piece of design thinking. 2.3 millimeters across, thinner than the wire in a paperclip. That's the whole erasing surface here, extended from a barrel the size of a pen by clicking the end. At that scale, erasing stops being an act of removal and becomes an act of precision. You can lift a single letter out of a word, clean the highlight in a drawn eye, or pull one line out of a dense sketch while everything around it stays untouched. Rescuing a drawing you thought you'd ruined turns out to be a wonderful feeling. A damp cloth wipes a full page blank, and that's the least interesting thing about it. The pages carry a synthetic coating that specific pens bond to temporarily rather than permanently, so writing sits on the surface instead of soaking in. Before wiping, the companion app scans each page and files it automatically based on symbols you tick at the bottom. Write, send, erase, repeat indefinitely. Dozens of notebooks collapsed into one that never fills up, and the pen it was built around is still to come. Printers used to be furniture. This one sits in a closed fist and runs without ink, toner, or a ribbon of any kind. Heat-sensitive paper does all of it. The print head darkens the coating directly, which is why the only thing you ever replace is the paper roll. Send a photo, a to-do list, or a page of notes over Bluetooth, and it emerges seconds later as a peel and stick label. It's the closest thing to printing straight out of your hand. Sweeping eraser dust off a table just relocates it to the floor. Midori's solution was a miniature vacuum that runs without a motor, a battery, or a cord, just a transparent car small enough to sit in your palm. push it along and the wheels drive a hidden brush inside that flicks debris up into a clear collection chamber. The whole mechanism is visible through the body, so you watch the shavings disappear as it rolls. It takes about 4 seconds to clear a page's worth of mess, and roughly the same amount of time to become the thing you look forward to most about finishing a drawing. Fragile, transparent, and somehow the most reliable dip pen ever made. The nib is solid hand-pulled glass, twisted into a spiral that runs down to a fine point. Those grooves do all the work, dip the tip into ink, and capillary action pulls color up into the channels, holding enough for several sentences. As you write, ink travels down the spiral and releases gradually, and you can see the level dropping through the pen itself. Switching colors takes a rinse in water and nothing more. Nearly a century and a half old as a design, and still one of the few writing instruments where you can watch the ink work. Did anyone tell you a stack of paper could be a sculpture waiting to happen? Every single page here has been laser cut with a slightly different silhouette, so as you tear sheets away, a shape slowly rises out of the pad. A tree, a castle, a temple. The paper you're using and the artwork you're revealing are the same object, and there's an LED base underneath that lights the emerging structure once enough layers are gone. Every page you finish makes it more beautiful, which is a wonderful thing to say about a notepad. The ink is thermochromic, and that single word hides something remarkable. Write normally, and it behaves like any gel pen. Rub the plastic tip on the back over your words, and friction heat pushes the ink past 60 degrees, where the pigment turns completely colorless, chemically invisible, while the ink itself stays on the page. Which leads to the trick nobody expects. Put that same page in a freezer for 20 minutes, and everything you erased comes back, exactly as you wrote it. Mistakes that can be undone and then recovered later aren't stationery. It's closer to a magic trick that happens to write, a stapler with nothing in it. Empty of cartridges, refills, and metal entirely, and it still binds paper permanently. Squeeze the handle, and a blade punches a small tongue out of the sheets themselves, then a hook immediately folds that tongue back and threads it through a slit cut in the same motion. The paper is now stitched to itself, using only what was already there. Up to 10 sheets hold firmly enough to survive a bag, and the whole bundle goes into recycling in one piece without a single extra part added. Buying staples for the rest of your life quietly eliminated by a single very clever fold. That's 35 reasons your desk deserves more credit than it gets. If one of these made you pause, drop a like, send it to someone whose desk needs help, and subscribe. There are stranger things out there still.